any other creature that people were familiar with at the time.
And 13 years later, on the other side of the world, a dinosaur was unearthed, and it was called Edmontosaurus. And when you look at a reconstruction of Edmontosaurus next to the sketch of the Bunyip drawn by the artist for the newspaper in Geelong on the basis of Aboriginal descriptions, the two are very similar.
You have to interpret evidence of the present in relation to the past. And what I would say is this: there is very strong circumstantial evidence, because all evidence in relation to the past is like a forensic scientist. They're working with circumstantial evidence. Is very strongly confirms the Bible's history that dinosaurs and people lived at the same time.
With so many people hunting him, Danny had to hide. As he rumbled back toward the ocean, he passed a man with two daughters walking along the beach. Instead of running, they just stopped and stared in shock. Danny said, "Hello, how are you?" which sounded like a ferocious roar.
We think many of your dragon legends could actually be stories about what we today call dinosaurs.
The reason why you don't find the word dinosaur in the Bible is the same reason why you don't find words like computer or locomotive, because all of those words were invented in the English language well after the Bible was translated into English.
The word dinosaur wasn't invented until 1841 by Sir Richard Owen, who was head of the British Museum. Before that, words such as dragon were used in the Bible.
The King James Bible was first translated into English in 1611. So the word dinosaur is a modern word.
There's a distinct philosophy that is able to be identified when you look at the King James Version of the Bible that was first printed in 1611 to the more modern translations in the English language like the ESV. In 1611, they used the word dragon 35 times. In the Old Testament alone, they used the plural word dragon 16 times. But if you look at the ESV today, they use the word dragons in the plural form 0. And what is very clear to see is that whenever dragon is used to refer to a real living, breathing creature that walks upon land, the ESV has decided that that is not a word that can be used. Most of the time they replace it with jackal, which is like a little hairy dog. Now that is a big discrepancy between a small, hairy, fox-like creature and a big, gigantic reptile-like creature. And what you see is that the evolutionary mindset has seeped into so many things that we have even our most conservative Bible theologians look at dragons. They do not make the connection between dragon and dinosaur, and they have the idea that, wow, dragons aren't real, and so we have to protect the inerrancy of the Bible.
Most of the people believe that dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago, and therefore humans couldn't possibly have seen them because they haven't been around that long. So it's a case of a faulty view of history with this millions of years imposed upon it, which means they have to try to explain away human encounters with creatures which we would call dragons.
But sometimes we treat God like he's a little old lady that needs help crossing the street. You know, no, I believe that God said what he means, and he means what he said. So if dinosaurs and dragons really are one and the same, one might actually ask, well, why did dragons fade into mythology to begin with? And that's a really good question.
So you had all cultures in the world essentially passing on stories about big lizards. And over time, those stories get corrupted, they get distorted. It's a fish story of the day, you know, they get this added or that added, and all of a sudden they become magical and they cast spells in at least in modern fantasy literature.
It was not until around the year 1800 that a French scientist named Georges Cuvier started to publish his findings that the extinction of a species was actually possible. Before that time, no one thought that species could go extinct. They actually thought that God had a kind of a supernatural preservation on all the species of the world. The reason they thought that was an errant view of the Bible. They go back to Genesis and said, you know, that God created all the creatures and that it was good. So they thought that at that point that there was kind of a supernatural preservation on that. That then got reinforced again when the flood came. And the story of Noah's flood is that God was going to cleanse the planet and was going to basically start over and with Noah and his family. Well, he had Noah bring all the animal kinds 2 by 2 to the ark. And again, there was this sense of preservation.
We didn't invent the word dinosaur until the 1800s. And so anything before the 1800s could not have used the word dinosaur. And so no Bible translations would use the word dinosaur prior to the 1800s, and since then no Bible translation would dare to use the word dinosaur because of pressure from the evolutionists.
So people before the 1800, as they're hearing these stories of dragons, they're looking around saying, I don't see that creature alive today, and if it is not alive today, then it was never alive. And that is how and why dragons fade into mythology.
There are a lot of things that over the years have been found that were thought to have been extinct. Some mammals, some fishes, some plants. The coelacanth was the classic example from the early 1900s. The Wollemi pine, which was discovered in the later 1900s. So there's a lot of things that pop up that no one thought should be, everyone thought went extinct. But it turns out that they're still here and they're essentially unchanged from the way they were supposedly millions of years ago.
And also there's an Australian living fossil that's very well known. It's called the Wollemi pine, and it was found in a very isolated part of a conservation reserve near Sydney in New South Wales, and it quickly became known as the dinosaur tree because they said it had lived alongside the dinosaurs, and the initial dating of the Wollemi pine fossils was that it had been thought to be extinct for many millions of years.
Now, when they found this Wollemi pine just a short time ago, the curator of the Sydney Botanical Gardens apparently said it's just like finding a live dinosaur. I think he said a live small dinosaur, because the point is it has exactly the same significance.
Now, the coelacanth is a fish. Fossils have been found of this fish that the evolutionists say died out, say, 70 million years ago, came on the scene about 400 million years ago. The reality is, in 1938, off of the island of Madagascar, fishermen started catching coelacanths. And so now the evolutionist is presented with a problem. If coelacanths died out 75 million years ago, what's a live one doing in 1938? And they found a lot more of them. Some are even in aquariums today.
Here's an interesting thing. Years ago, when I was in undergraduate school in Minnesota, I was taking a course in botany, and our professor took us all outside the botany building to pay obeisance to a ginkgo tree. And we all stood around in just deep reverence looking at this ginkgo tree, because we were told that this ginkgo tree, we can see it in the fossil record back to the time of the dinosaurs and beyond, and here it is growing alive and well just outside of our botany building. And isn't that amazing? And boy, we were impressed. But you know, now that I look back on that, why didn't our prof just show us the far more abundant oak trees and elm trees? Because they're in the fossil record too. We have acorns, we have walnuts, and these are dating back 40, 50 million years. No, I don't accept these dates. I believe the Earth is 6,000 years old. But if you're going to accept these dates, we have a tank here in the Creation Museum that is full of native Kentucky aquatic creatures. Sunfish, which have been found, the good old sunny you fish for, you know, if you like to fish. They were around back, according to the fossil record, 40, 50 million years ago. Garfish go back at least as far as the dinosaurs. We have the short-nosed gar in the tank. Turtles, 120 million years. Bats, 60 million years, 50 million years, and they look just like the bats do today.
Amber is what I call a time capsule. It is some amber is supposed to be up to 50 million years old, and quite a bit of amber has what are called inclusions in it. Now, inclusions can be insects, they could be water, they could be oxygen or air bubbles, if you will. And the reason I call amber a time capsule is, lo and behold, when we find, for example, ants and termites, we've even found the pine bark beetle that is decimating the forests in the Rocky Mountain West. These animals, or these insects, if you will, are exactly the same as what we have today.
The Jurassic shrimp was supposed to become extinct during the Jurassic time, and yet they're alive and well and just as delicious today as back in the alleged evolutionary past. And so these living fossils, I think, are clear testimony to the youth of this Earth.
Terrified, the man pushed